All right, perfect. We're recording. All right, so going back then to the second slide, that would be, and we end up with the Q&A. So if you have any questions, any comments, whatever, please just use the chat bars throughout the session and we can figure that out. Right now, I think we can start with a pair grouping. I don't know what you guys think. Wait, some people are joining. Amaris, Jill, maybe in pairs, more than threesomes. What do you think?
Okay, that works.
Sounds good. All right.
Breakout rooms assign manually, because Amaris and Jill, you'll be sitting out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Now, what we're going to do for this beginning of the discussion is when we talked about this with Amaris and Jill, we just kept coming up with this idea of balance. You know, it's not about one thing or the other. It's about how you balance it out. And the first thing that we want to share, especially from everyone's perspective and experiences in their schools, is how this has worked out in your own experience. You know, in this small group work that we're going to have, we would ask you to just share examples of situations when the balance has been difficult to achieve. You know, situations where it's very difficult to reconcile these two moments and finding a middle ground, and at the same time just share examples of situations when the balance has been achieved successfully. If you have, how have you been able to do it? What have you been able to maybe take into account, or what methods have you tried that have been successful, so that we can all then come back and share it within the bigger group, and you can choose one of you to be the one who shares what you discuss, or both, however you feel. Am I leaving out anything, Andrea, Jill, Amaris?
That sounds good.
Good. All right.
Nice and clear.
Okay. Well, then Andrea will just assign the rooms, and so we can have that discussion, and you can go, and then we will come back to this.
So how many minutes, Gabby?
We're gonna have it at 8 to 10 minutes, you know, just to have so that each one gets a chance to share their own experience within this topic.
Okay, great. Perfect. Here we go. Anna did some really great sharing about you know, giving being so flexible that you're actually looking at the needs of every child individually. And I don't know if you want to talk about the example you gave, which was so heartwarming.
We're talking about balance and flexibility with the little ones. I teach kindergarten. So for them, time on screen is so hard. And now in Brazil, we are having a decree that 30% of the school population is going to school. So they're going to school in the afternoon and they're having VLP in the morning. But I have this specific child in my classroom that he learns so much, even though that we are going back and forth of going to school, being online, and he is reading really well. And yesterday we celebrate Readers Workshop, and we made capes for the little ones for them to face their powers and all. And he is a child that he needs to feel welcome. And he was not there because the parents didn't allow him to go. They were scared because of the virus. So what I did, I made his cape. And yesterday, I was telling them that yesterday I went to his house and I dropped it off to him, and I spent like a couple of minutes, like 5 minutes, just listening and seeing how happy he was that he felt belonged in the classroom as well, even though that he is online. So we were talking about well-being of the little ones. So those are the kind of attention that I truly believe that we have to be flexible and give to the little ones, especially the little ones, because they don't know how to handle this new virtual thing that we are going on. So everything that we just try to do everything that we can. And that was just one thing that I thought, I was like, you know what, I just grabbed my child, my girl, my daughter, put her in the car, drove to his house, dropped it off. It was like 5-10 minutes. and he was very happy. So, and the family was happy as well. So I think that the well-being of the whole community, it's really important at this point for all of us.
Thanks for that
Absolutely.
example, Anna. That was great.
You know, I think it would help if you would share some of the difficulties. We were talking with Dina and with Paulina, and they were sharing some of the difficulties, especially where it concerns the parent part of the equation. You know, like maybe the school wants to be flexible and all of this, but sometimes the parents are the ones who are not allowing this. I don't know if you would like Paulina to share some of what you were saying. I found it really, really important and interesting.
Yes, hello. I hope that you can hear me well.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing that I share is that the principal difficulties that we found in the school is that our community, because the majority, not the majority, but important population of our community is from other countries. And the problem is that that the parents don't permit, don't allow us to do other activities that that give more spaces to do other activities like social activities or integration activities, because they only want that they have classes. And when we talk with the parents and say it's important that the kids have other spaces when they can talk, when they can do other activities, not only academic things, the parents say no, the school is for academic things. My sons need to have a good grade for the university or for the SAT or whatever exam, and they don't allow us to do these activities. But other side, we have Mexican population and kids that are really, really overwhelmed, really stressed, and they need activities. And for me, I'm the counselor in the school, and for me, it's really difficult to find this balance between academic things and the other part, social things, and the emotional well-being of the students. That's my principal difficulty that I found in this moment.
Well, lucky for you, we're here in front of these powerhouse of women who have been there and done that, and through their examples, I think today we can co-create, what that can look like, and how we move on. Really valuable.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, the same with Dina, right? You were sharing a little bit of the same struggle when it came to parents having their own ideas about what is supposed to happen in school, right? Dina, I think you're muted.
Good morning. What I shared is that our parents are really anxious for us to, and looking forward for us to open spaces, physical spaces for the students to get together and meet. They're very, very concerned about the social and emotional aspect of the students, and they're demanding the school to open spaces, and that's really difficult for us as a school, because we need to continue following the government alignments and movement, and it's difficult because they also compare our school with other school of the Jewish community. I am the principal of a Jewish community, and they compare between themselves, and it's like just looking outside instead of looking inside what the school is doing. So it becomes really stressful, because we're risking teachers, we're risking our own staff to be able to meet expectations, and in reality, students are meeting and having a social life during the afternoons, and still they need more. So it seems very confusing, and there's a lot of resistance. Teachers are not willing to collaborate when we are in this type of situation, still in this type of situation, and the government is now about to open activities, but we're still not ready for that. And the parents are really, really upset because they want their children and the students to get together, and that is their priority. They're not concerned about learning or about anything. It's just the opposite, as Paulina was saying. So, meet what parents are willing to receive from the school is a real challenge. So, and as a principal, it's very difficult to stay in a position where you're flexible, but you're also balance the whole person at the same time, no?
That's and a different expectation, no? One of the parents, we need this, but the teachers, their safety, and it's just
and the government and also the board members that want to meet the parents' needs, and it becomes very complicated.
Well, and I think that the biggest challenges happen when the majority of those groups see what I put into the chat, right? Equate suffering with learning, right? If my kid isn't coming home and having 5 hours of homework, and if they have room to breathe in the time that they spend at school and seem happy about education, then maybe they're not learning enough. And that's such a false paradigm. And I think that's really the root of so much of it. And whether it's our boards, our parents, our colleagues who think that way, getting folks to a point where they're willing to think really differently about education and say that maybe when kids are enjoying themselves, they might actually learn far more and more deeply and in more lasting and important ways. Like, it's really contrary for a lot of people. There's a big transformation of thinking that's required there. But it's essential to do it from my perspective. And yes, I did share the article that I wrote about that for El Tiempo, because I was getting so frustrated with that tendency of parents to feel like if my kid wasn't struggling and suffering their way through everything, that they weren't learning. And I do believe in healthy struggle and healthy frustration within projects, of course, right? But that mentality of it takes the drill and kill for kids to learn something it's outdated.
Sure. But when the only currency for outward facing student success are a grading system, it's really hard to balance that dissonance with, experiential and the currency that shows to the rest of the world that they've sustained success through this period of time is a real unstructured balance that we have to pull some of those things out. I think that's been one of our biggest challenges in working with school leaders, is how we are really having to change what the currency for kids, what their operational value or their key performance indicators, when we think about it from that operational standpoint, we have to really look at the entire system, and that fear of mitigating learning loss, where our students won't be able to sustain success when they're a junior and senior and taking exams and really identifying where they should go, that still comes down to that currency. And it's hard to balance that dissonance that parents feel and the anxiety that students feel based on that, and how that anxiety manifests itself in balance and structure even for teachers. Sorry, I didn't wait to talk. I got excited. I did bounce off what she said.
No, definitely.
The exciting thing is that the pandemic has come to really just shed some light on all of this, right? And so through all the trial and error, we're coming to terms with, right, the things that have worked well and what things we still need to review, and really looking forward to hearing you, Jill and Amaris, to give us those takeaways, right, that these leaders are looking for, I think. Do we have any more comments before we go ahead, Gabby?
I would like to add what are some of the things that we are doing at our school.
Yeah.
I teach at,
Sandy.
I don't teach at Foresta International School. I am the English coordinator. And some of the things we've been doing is when there is this shout for help from parents, the position is we are shrinking some of their schedules. Like we don't have everyone shouting out for help, but for those that are doing so, we are shrinking their schedule to less hours a day. We have about 6 hours of online learning daily. So we shrink it to 4 hours a day. And then we ask them to send videos for the PE class, or if there is something that they have to do for the art lesson, then they can do it on their own. And that has helped a lot and has kept their well-being. And the other thing we have been doing ever since we started, I would say, is to have play dates at school that I forgot to mention. We do this play dates like, let's say, on a Friday when here in Mexico we have CTEs. And so this is like a moment for teachers who belong to the SEP, which is the Secretaría de Educación Pública. They get together. And so they teachers, we go to school and we have activities that involve, you know, physical education, something that has to do with art, social-emotional. And this next following week, it's Dia del Niño here. So we're going to have something academic involved. We're going to have some science experiments. And even if teachers don't want to attend, because we understand that they are looking after themselves and we have lots of teachers who are at risk, we cover each other. And so we plan things so that students are at school. And this has been a blessing, honestly, because parents tell us that when they come out from school that day, they are so energized, they are so enthusiastic that it takes them, you know, like, wow, so until next month when we meet. And the other thing we're planning on doing is having bubble groups going to school. We're not allowed to go to school, but we're gonna be in a soccer field that it does not belong to the school either. So we're gonna start seeing how we can get to have them aboard, and so that they wait until we are finally back to school, hopefully before the end of the school year. So those are the things we're trying to do in order to keep the balance. Being flexible is key.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this has come up with the rest, but I think when we talk about creating awareness for parents, maybe it's opening up a dialogue of saying, look, this is not a situation that the school has chosen. This is a situation that is outside of the control of the school and of the parents and of the students, clearly. No, so when it comes about resilience, it's taking into account what is within our control, what is out of our control, and then negotiate from there so that people stop being angry because they feel a little bit more in control. So however you can get that feeling of having choices, and maybe not the ones that I like, but they're still choices, sometimes help, you know, bring the intensity, the emotional intensity down, and that helps opening up the dialogue with the parents and get them to be flexible. Because when parents tend to be very, you know, drastic on this is what we want, that the school should give it to us, and it talks more about their emotional level of intensity, and that's a bad place to try to dialogue and try to come up with flexible solutions that work for everyone. So the best way is just help parents bring that intensity down and just open up the dialogue. I don't know if that makes sense to to everyone else, but it can be something also to keep in mind, no? As Paulina was sharing, or also Dina, for that difficulty. But okay, so anyone else? Welcome, Priscilla and Leo, that you're joining, and we're so happy to have you. Don't worry, we understand Saturdays are complicated, so don't even look that worried. Okay, all right.
No, sorry. I mean, thank you, and I was looking forward ever since I met you, ladies, and nice to meet to all of you guys. But I was looking forward, but it just got mixed up with another seminar that I had, and I finished just about 10 minutes ago. I gotta go in and see, and I was coming in and I was listening to what Jennifer said, and I forgot the name of the person who was speaking.
Ana Rocha or
Ana Rocha.
Santi Campos. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know it's hard because and I wanted just to add one thing. It's hard because schools have become daycare for parents, and having them at home it's hard for parents because they don't even know their children. And I think that's something that we have to teach our parents, because I'm a father as well. And seeing your kid learn and being locked up 24 hours, it's just, it brings a burden upon a lot of people sometimes. And that's where I don't know what we're going to do or how we're going to fix it. But in every context, it's just sometimes it's more complicated. Sometimes it just becomes easier. But it's something that we have to learn and help and teach so we can, give benefit for our students. And as Andrea mentioned, what this pandemic came in, it has brought us good things. And the idea is to learn from all this and improve. That's all I just wanted to tell you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Leo. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate your input.
Vanessa, welcome as well. And we're so happy to have you. We're finishing the small group work, just so that you know. And we were having a discussion about, moments where balancing this part of flexibility and structure has been achieved, and moments where it has definitely been just, completely out of reach, which we've all had that. So we were sharing some of those experiences, just to catch you up. And
thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. I think Amaris and Jill, please, if you want to, let me see, hold on. We're going to go on to the part where they prepared. We're very happy to have their experience. They're just amazing, passionate women, right, Jill? And every time we get together to talk, we always have that shared passion, and we have these conversations that could last for hours, but because they're topics that we love, right?
Actually, also, Jill's been with us and Amaris both in our Ed Talk series, guys, and building up from there and their expertise, right, Gabby, on the work that they do on innovation, learner-centered environment, school culture, and community engagement, is that they bring us today this really great session. Jill herself has worked in over 30 states in the US, 20 different countries around the world. She has over 20 years experience teaching, coaching, administrating K-12 schools in both the public and private sector. And she's also a book author, guys. Her book is on developing natural curiosity through project-based learning. And she's an expert in design at the senior learning designer at Fielding International. Jill, I hope I've done justice to your background, which is so varied and rich.
Left out that she's a disruptive optimist, which I love about her, and it's absolutely true. So, right, Jill?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we also have Amaris with us, and Amaris was the godmother of our Ed Talks, right, Amaris?
Yay.
Yes, also been working with us, and she's head of school at Avante Global School, and she's the academic director at Gimnasio Los Cabos. This is in Colombia, and she's worked 25 years as an innovative, teacher, counselor, administrator, curriculum developer, and school designer, and absolutely in love with project-based learning as well. And it's some of the things that we're going to be talking about, right? And in the content that we're going to be reviewing. So
I want to add to that, Gabriela, that Amaris has founded a school during pandemic. So she's really revolutionized the way that students learn and shifting the paradigm in education and how our communities engage within the new school cultures.
That is so true. That's a special, I think that's a special badge, Amaris, that very few people will be able to share and say, opening a school during this type of situation is just a one-of-a-kind experience, right?
Absolutely. This is the third school that I've opened, and this has definitely a whole other characteristic to it. So, yeah.
Yes, well, thank you so much, and please go ahead.
Well, and I think as we've worked together, Amaris, do I say it Amaris or Amaris? Because I say it every different way on every different call. What
yes, I mean, if you're saying it as a person who speaks Spanish, you would say Amaris. But if you say it as a person who does not speak Spanish, then you say it every which way possible. So,
Okay,
you know,
good.
I answer to everything. So,
Okay, good.
however you want to say
I'll make
it.
sure I get it right. So, because I sound like I know Spanish when I use my accent, even though
You
I'm
do.
not very good at
You
it.
do.
So, but I think in our conversations over, even before the pandemic, you know, that trying to keep flexibility and structure in a school as the head of school is, you know, really focused on, and through this triangulated process of relationship, results, and process. And we really dug into trying to think about what is it that school leaders are really balancing well and what's unbalanced during this pandemic. And for us, these three topics really resonated and again rose to the surface around how we build out structure in a pandemic, which is completely ambiguity, while leaving it flexible enough to honor people's anxiety and fear and safety and trust during this time in a really you know, scary time for all of us all over the world. And so you know, with that, just thinking about, as I work with different school leaders around the world, we've taken, and Gabrielle, if you just want to, Gabrielle, move to the next slide, I think we could just jump in. So I'm fortunate enough on my end to work with multiple school leaders around the world, and thinking about those three items as we balance this has really shed light on what a learning ecosystem is. You know, that we as school leaders have a vision for what we want for student success, but we really have to think about human capacity and our learning environment. And this year has been really telling as to what that learning environment is, because that's been the rug that's been pulled out from under us. And so if we're not connecting that home environment and really supporting parents and students and teachers with the communication and building those relationships both in and out of school, it's been a real challenge. And I think, Leo, I think you said it best, around, you know, many parents don't know their kids. So having them in an environment where they're working from home, their kids are trying to work from home, and that they're trying to build vision around what is my family unit in our environment, and all these new human relationships on the ground has been really challenging for everybody in coming together. And so as an organization, we really have spent time with our school leaders to think about what is the structure. And the structure really has come out to, you know, we have to build relationships between all of these, and getting parents to understand. And so on the next slide, what we've moved into with our school leaders is really thinking about what are the types of relationships that need to emerge to really build structure through those communicative pieces, and all of our vital stakeholders. Because if we find out, if we leave one member out or one connecting place with people, our communication is ambiguous. And so how do we start to identify who those vital stakeholders are for school leaders to ensure that when we're going back and reimagining relationships with parents and getting them to reimagine their relationships with their students, that we have to really find structure in who the relationships are and how we can connect these relationships and connect the dots. And that's what leads to student success, whether they're at home or in school, is really identifying that. And Amaris has been really successful during this pandemic to identify that. And I'm going to pass it off to her to she'll give you some examples of what that looks like in real time from her school.
Thanks, Jill. So on the next slide, Gabi, what you'll see here is just a few little clips of something that we thought about, like this idea of how do we create this ecosystem or this community of learners when, number one, we're starting a brand new school in a city that's pretty traditional. And so it's this uphill battle. And at the same time, really teach families what we're all about. So we decided to do it the best way that I know how, which is actually take them through a project. And so I designed a project, and all of it virtual, mind you, in which we shared with our families who had enrolled. So this was way back a year ago, before the school even opened. So starting back in March of 2020, when the pandemic just was kind of hitting the Western Hemisphere, that they could do with their families. And we're talking 2-year-olds through 7-year-olds. And we set them up in Google Classroom. Weekly, I sent them Google Slides, taking them through all the phases of a project, had them creating anchor charts in their house and word walls in their house, set them up with all kinds of things for success, all working towards an authentic project and product, and had them really understand what it was like to build relationships for them within the family. Because for us, foundationally, it's all about relationships. And so if they understand that within their family, they're going to certainly understand that better within their school. And so this was a 6 weeks project, and I would send them their slides. I would send them a video that I would do, and taking them through each one of the slides. And then they would post within the Google Classroom, and they got to know each other as families and as a community even before school started. And they learned all about project-based learning and what that was. So on the next slide, what you'll see is that we also had to start thinking about creating a community of learner for their class. So now we were getting closer to August. We were opening a school that we couldn't go to physically. We couldn't even meet each other physically or have events. Normally when you're talking about starting a school or beginning any new school year, you'd have all of these events, and they would come together and people would get to know each other, and we would start celebrating who we are as a community of learners at school. Well, we couldn't do any of that. So again, I turned to what I know how to do best as a teacher, which is to take them through a project. So now all of our families, and at this point it was about 50 students that we had enrolled between 2 years old and 7 years old. They were going through this onboarding through a project very similar to the one I had done months before with them. And some of these were new families who did not go through that initial project. But this was a very specific purpose. It was to define and align thinking about what is Avante, what is this school Avante all about, and then also to help our little ones, because they're all little, how do you prepare for school? All of our students were students that either had never been to school before, don't even know what school is all about, or were changing to a brand new school. And so it was all about, how do we create this community together? How do we define it? And again, we took them through all the phases of a project. So this started about mid-July, ended about mid-August, and this was specifically designed for when the teachers started with the students, that they would just pick right up into this phase of the project and continue building that community with their class in the school. So this is how we did it. And we also added to this that once we started with the students, we would send them weekly kits of materials, because I think, Leonardo, you said it perfectly, in that parents don't know how to do this and they're scared to death. And also parents are really busy. If you have 2 working parents and now you've got little ones who need to be on a computer and connected virtually, and they really have an attention span of -2 minutes, like how on earth can parents do that? Because they have to stop and print something or go find a material, or like that just totally ruins the whole thing. So we wanted to make that process for them as seamless as possible. So we printed everything for them. We gathered all materials. If we were asking them to create something that needed tissue paper, then we sent them the tissue paper. If we wanted them to use, you know, toilet paper rolls to do a prototype of something, we sent them that. Like, we did it all for them so that it was really about them focusing on their child and their child's learning. We did the heavy lifting. So on the next slide, you'll see, okay, well, that's great, Amaris. You did it with the families and the parents, but now, how do you do that as educators? Anytime you start a new school year, this is such a fun time. I always love the beginning of a new school year because this is when we get to really imagine ourselves and our school all over again. And it's super exciting to bring all of us together as educators. And again, could not do that. We had to do it all virtually. One of our international teachers was even still stuck in the US. Like, she couldn't even get into Colombia. And so it was like, how do we do this? Like, we're starting this new school, and most of our teachers had never taught project-based learning before. They love the idea, they love the concept, they've thought about it very well, and they have the mindset for it, but they don't know how to do it. So how do I teach them how to do that in such a short time period? So again, do what I do best, which is take them through a project. So we created this 2-week project that was all about their final product was their curriculum that they were building from literally zero, and took them through all the phases of the project. And then they were able to apply all of that immediately when they were starting their class. And we began to develop our structure and in our community as learners, because we're learners in this as well, as much, if not more, than the students. So those are just a few small examples of how, you know, we were able to develop some structures to be able to really focus on relationships, and to ensure as much as possible success in a world that is absolutely unpredictable, and we can't know what's going to happen from week to week, even now. Yeah.
Well, and I think as we solidify these relationships with our families, the next piece that we dove into with school leaders is really the results. How do we ensure students are successful and healthy? And how do we mitigate the virus during this time and reimagine what the spaces of schools feel like? Because some of the international schools that I work with have 2,300 elementary students, or they have 6 elementary schools. So the head of school really has to think about the science of opening that school. And what does reopening look like on an individual basis? What are those individual factors that affect parents, students, and teachers? Who are staff members, folks who are delivering food to the campus? What are the environmental factors that we then have to balance to ensure that we're reimagining and adjusting schedules to allow time for virus mitigation, knowing that it's an aerosol-based, environmentally spread virus? What are the things that we really need to provide? So we worked with school leaders, and really based on individual schools, we helped them realign their master schedules to really account for safety on an individual level, as well as safety on an environmental level. And it was actually a really phenomenal time to get school leaders to throw out the old timetable and to start to say, I don't have to learn within the confines of those traditional structures, because, and Gabby, if you'll move to the next slide, because when we think about environmental factors and really the mitigating risks, we had to really think about the way that air was transferred in a building. Because in order to clean out these spaces in a traditional double-loaded corridor school, the hallways are where the virus sits, because traditional ventilation system puts all the air into a hallway. And so the ways in which we're ventilating those hallways are how we keep kids safe. And those are the results that parents want when their students return to school. Those are the results that teachers want guaranteed. So not only do we have to stay on top of all this information, we then had to, through the relationships, prove that we've created an internal physical environmental structure that was going to keep their kids safe in this ventilated system, but it had to be flexible enough because the news is changing every week about what that means. And so part of results is making sure that we're understanding the science of how to really create those safe learning environments and environments that allow students to virtually participate as well as participate in person. And what are the ways in which we were setting up those ventilation systems that would prove to parents that their children would be safe? And that again led back to how do leaders cascade the messages of what they're doing in their physical environments to ensure the results. Their students are safe. So Gabi, if you'll move to the next slide. What we did is we really worked with leaders on what is your role in communicating how you're going to get results. And so we really looked at who they have to communicate these results to and beyond. And so going from what's your superpower, the ways in which you communicate through your role, and making sure that we're always going back to the purpose of student success, sustaining that success while they're also safe. And those are the results that we had to then work with school leaders. How do you cascade that message to all those vital stakeholders and make sure that you're doing it in a way that honors your superpower, and making sure that that goes through all those different stakeholders? And that's a really challenging piece for leaders, ensuring that we're cascading the science of reopening, and we're doing it in a way that all the stakeholders are able to connect. So we have some stakeholders who, they don't want graphics and images. They want to see all the science and research. Then we have other stakeholders who want to see something in 30 seconds, a visual that says, okay, my school leader knows what they're doing, I can move on. And others that need to engage in dialogue. So we really worked with school leaders to think about what are those touch points that you need to do virtually, whether it's a virtual cafe, a virtual dissemination of the analysis, or bringing in experts to speak. We really had to think about those levels of what results mean in that space. And now I'm going to hand it off to you, Amaris. Amaris, I'm going to forever do that. And let you talk about, you know, when we did it at this larger level, what does that then mean? What are those nuggets? What are the things that you did specifically based on your superpowers that you brought to the table to help your stakeholders see the results within your learning environments?
Thank you so much, Jill. I don't know if I have superpowers, but if I had to define a superpower, I would say my superpower is that I know really, really smart people and know when to tap into them. And one of those is Ewan McIntosh. Ewan McIntosh, if you do not follow him, you do not know him, you need to. He is just brilliant. I've known and worked with him for years. And every single time I just am floored by these things, these nuggets that he just puts out there. And I'm like, wow, why didn't I think of it that way? This is one of them. Now, we were very fortunate in opening Avante. We were building our school from the ground up. And so therefore, all of the things that Jill was talking about physically, the physical plant and the circulation, and then, you know, we were bringing in HEPA filters, hospital grade from the US. That was all taken care of for us. So that was not an issue, but there were so many other things that were coming up. And yes, as leaders, we were always having to know what to communicate, when to communicate, what to change, what not to change. And so this, Ewan put out this call for leaders around the world. I think it was like about maybe October, November, just this past year, 2020. And it was all about, you know, how are you going to make this year, the silver linings really help you with your goals and your mission at your school. And so I signed up for that in a heartbeat and really worked over like 6 weeks with these unbelievable, amazing leaders around the world. And one of the first things he asked us to do was this analysis of a post-crisis intervention grid, if you will. And so as you can see there, it's 4 quadrants, right? Along the x-axis, we're talking about what are the things after the crisis that we must either stop or continue to start? And then along the y-axis, during the crisis, these are things we had to stop or we had to start. And for everyone, it was different. So he had us brainstorm all these different things on these sticky notes, and then we put them into quadrants based on whether or not we were going to actually completely, we want to eliminate them from our practice. And then things that we just need to let go. Other things that we want to restart, but we had to stop because of the pandemic, or that we wanted to change. And then things that we had started and we love them and we want to continue to do them and we want to amplify them and make them bigger. And so throughout this process, I was really able to focus on the positive. And it's really about, you know, thinking about what is the silver lining. Yes, there have had to be a lot of things that change over this past year, but there are so many incredible positive things that have come out of it. And so this was, if you want to work with your team, work with a group of people, work with your board, whoever it is, to really do this, I highly recommend it. And then this really helps you figure out what are those things you want to focus on as you think about the 2021-2022 school year, which I know we're already halfway into that planning. So this is just a nugget I think that every leader should grab onto and use, and then tweak it for the work that you want to do with your team.
Amaris, I don't know if you could go into a little bit of the things that you had to let go. I find it so interesting, and some of the things that you chose to amplify. I mean, just a little bit into the process of that.
Sure. This is a compilation of all of the leaders who were in my course or my class. So these aren't just from me, but it was interesting. For example, you know, in one school, they were talking about they stopped giving homework. For us, that wasn't an issue. We don't do homework at our school anyway. But for them, they were saying, like, we just, during the pandemic, it was just too much. Like, why would we give homework to kids? And so for them, they were like, yeah, we stopped doing it. And you know what? We might decide that we're going to eliminate that altogether. And so that was something that for them just kind of emerged. There was somebody who was talking about this idea of that, you know what, maybe face-to-face is not always the best way for some students to learn. And what we found out over these past several months, over a year really, is that for some students, the idea of distance learning is better for them. And they've actually thrived at that. And so giving that opportunity to think about, like, you know what? We've let go of that paradigm thinking of school is the best place for all kids. It might not be the best place for all kids, but how can they still be a part of our culture and of our learning? When we got to talking about in our group or in our course about things that we wanted to eliminate, there was no shortage of those thinkings. Like this idea of like time was so precious and we had to really think about how we were using time, and this idea of meetings that were pointless and meaningless, like get them out of our schedule altogether, right? Like, and then curriculum, like eliminating unnecessary curriculum. This pandemic has given us the permission to do so. And so that's beautiful that this has come out of that. We talked a lot about that. This idea that whole school is the only way to highlight important things that are going on, like whole events, or no, but we started thinking about this idea of like, we can really celebrate things that are going on in bubbles or pockets around the school. It doesn't have to be school-wide. So those are some of the things. I mean, to me, I really love some of the things that came about that we want to amplify. And you'll see there kind of in the middle, this outdoor learning. We all as leaders talked about, yes, like, and later on when I talk a little bit about how place was someplace that we started talking about a lot of flexibility for us, this idea of that, yeah, we can learn outside and outdoors can be a place for learning. And everyone, I think across the board from all of the different schools was like, yes, this is something that's going to continue to live and breathe and get bigger and better at all of our schools.
Yeah,
So,
I love that one in particular because it's something that some people thought it was too revolutionary to try before pandemic made it like the only option if we still want to have face-to-face, right?
exactly.
And I think this is the part where Jill really discusses how to prepare that home learning environment, right? And giving it the best sort of structure in order to make that deep learning happen as well.
Right, because we know in order for children to be successful in this, I used to say rapidly approaching AI and fully wired world, but it's here. But kids also have to have a, grounded experience in the physical world. And how do we support the development of their human skills in that physical world and making sure that outside is a part of that? I work with a colleague and I work together on diffused learning in outdoor spaces, and he's been working on it in Italy, and I was working on it with a group in Pakistan. Between the two of us on what does diffused learning mean? And as we were writing this book, How to Sustain Student Learning and Success During a Pandemic, we developed these 3 very specific scenarios. And for school leaders, really thinking about how we use our learning environments to ensure that we're building out the skills that our students need at every developmental level. We have a full return strategy, an alternating or a hybrid return strategy, but also a flexible strategy. How do we reimagine the use of our school buildings as collaborative spaces that don't necessarily need to be used as whole school? And how do we reimagine the connections to outside and to place, both online and within the community? So that way school leaders have these various scenarios to connect to if there is an increase in the pandemic and we're in full return, that they know how to put on the brakes and come back down to an alternating return model. But then giving parents the opportunity to understand, how do kids set up their environment at home? Because the environment in a building, in the school building, is very specific. It's run, it's very structured and organized. And then at home, it's much more flexible for children. They can move around their space with much more agency at home. So therefore, we really had to work with parents and communities. We had 5,000 people on one of our workshops for how do you set up a home learning environment. So really thinking about what does cognitive sensory experience for a child look like in the home learning space? And then what does it mean to produce agentic student work, giving students choice and agency of how they respond to an assignment that's required in a virtual experience? And then how do we build in very specific micro collaborations for students throughout the day so they feel connected? That social and emotional connectedness in a 40-minute experience over 6 to 8 hours a day, where you have teachers sitting in front of their computer and students sitting in front of their computer, is not sustainable for us as humans. And so how do we build out these different scenarios and give kids the tools to sustain learning in multiple types of environments, outdoor, community-based, alternating return where I have kids online and kids in school, and then back into that full return model. We have found it's those micro collaborations that really help energize kids and support their ability to feel connected throughout the day, but not so connected that, you know, they have their iPad inside their refrigerator while they're on class and trying to eat lunch because their school is saying they need to be on a minimum of 6 hours. And I say that from experience of my own child looking over and watching her in the refrigerator, eating on her iPad while she's in class and wondering how she's not cold because she's been standing there with refrigerator doors open for like 7 minutes at that point. So really, how do we reimagine what it looks like for parents? Because there is a wealth of opportunity that we want to amplify from this experience. What are the good things that are happening? How are we, and Gabby, if you'll move into that next slide, how are we taking things like project-based learning and reimagining schedules with learning communities? How do we now build in project-based learning at home when kids have an understanding of what it means to set their environment up for success, have freedom to move? What I've heard from kids the most that they love is that they get to move throughout the day. Whereas when they're in a school building, 90% of the creativity and collaboration is controlled by a teacher. But when you start to have agency in a space and in your own schedule, we're building skill sets that we want to continue and that we've been aspiring to amplify for the last 21 years. And so I think this is really a phenomenal opportunity to focus on new processes that emerged from this pandemic. And that's what we've been doing with school leaders, is really embedding project-based learning into every aspect of school leaders' experience, from PD to parent workshops to the expectations for students and what that means for them. And I'm going to hand it back up. Amaris is going to show you schedules and different ways that her school has really thought about reimagining the process, the timetables, this structured notion that kids have to travel all together at one time for learning to be successful, and that we can reimagine what that looks like.
So thanks, Jill. Yes, schedules and this idea of structure and flexibility and this balance and this fluidity between both has really been so important over this past school year. You know, we opened with this, or we intended to open with this lovely schedule that we had crafted, and it was just like the most incredible thing that we had imagined, and obviously all of that completely flew out the window with the pandemic. And so these are just a tiny few examples of the multiple iterations of all the different kinds of schedules. Jill was sharing with you 3 different, you know, possibilities for return: a full return, an alternative return, and then flexible return. Well, yeah, we're dealing with every single one of those currently right now. When we opened, we couldn't do any return. That was by law, by Colombian law. And so we had to figure out, like, how are we actually going to do this all virtually with 2 to 7-year-olds, knowing that it was completely and absolutely not developmentally appropriate to have all of that screen time. And we really were just struggling with that. And so we really wanted to give options. We wanted to give options for our parents. Some parents of very young children said, absolutely not. I want my child to have no screen time whatsoever. And then some of them were like, well, you know, we can see how much they can endure. And that was like literally 2.7, you know, seconds of time before they were up and running and doing other things. And so, and then we had our parents of 1st and 2nd graders who really, in a very traditional mindset of like, no, they need seat time and they have to be learning. And so it was all of those things that we had to look at. So, you know, we have like, 4 different, in-person schedules. We have 5 iterations of what we call the ideal model, which is the Avante distance interactive learning schedule. Yeah, we were trying to make some kind of cute acronym so it didn't sound so horrible. And then we had to look at all of the different minutes and hours that each one of them were having. And you can see that we have an alternating schedule currently in which we have students that come 4 days per week, and then they have 1 day of that distance learning as well. In the beginning, we couldn't do any of that, and so our schedule involved some form of virtual learning through classes, if you will, depending on the grade level or the age. And then in the afternoons, we had teachers going to actual student homes, and where this was absolutely the most amazing way to build and deepen relationships between children and teachers. It was absolutely not sustainable for the school or the teachers. It took a huge toll on teachers, and we very quickly knew that we had to get out of that. It served its purpose, but our teachers were going to die. Not because of infection, but because of exhaustion. So that had to shift. And we had to give them a lot of flexibility as well in terms of like understanding when they needed to move something in the schedule. And we also really wanted to emphasize that they had complete and total flexibility in terms of when they taught what. As you can see in those schedules, we don't have necessarily subject times. It's just called learning activities. And the teachers get to make those decisions. They get to determine. They're smart. They really understand what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. If you'll go to the next slide, this is where we talk about the structure and flexibility in our curriculum. So this is where they themselves, yes, we have standards we follow. Yes, we have platforms on which they need to document and communicate. Yes, we have expectation and agreements about all of our curriculum and our pedagogy. But there's a lot of space there for teachers as professionals to make those decisions. And so we embed into our weekly schedule our adult learning time so that they can have those spaces to plan their curriculum, modify curriculum, give critique and feedback, play with things, and they get to make those determinations about what's best for students and their students at that time. And that has been really, I think, some of the hardest work that our teachers have ever done in their lives, but also some of the most rewarding work. And so this is where we will always continuously balance that structure and flexibility and allow that for our teachers. And then finally, on the next slide, you'll see I had mentioned that place. Place was, as you see there, that render right in the middle, that was what we imagined when we were designing the school over, 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. This was where it was all going to happen and it was going to be fabulous. And then, of course, we couldn't even go to the school. So how did we reimagine it? Well, we went to homes. Many of them live, this is in Cartagena, so many of them live in high-rise apartments with balconies. So we were on the balconies, making sure people were safe. We offered them all the PPE. We were in parks and on the beach. I know, rough life that we live. But I mean, this was really where, because teachers were scared. They were really, really scared. It's not that they didn't want to do it. They really knew that this was what was developmentally most appropriate for their students, and they wanted to do the right thing. But they're human beings, and many of them have their own families at home, and they're like, how can we do this? And so we just tried to make it as flexible as possible for everyone's comfort. There were some families, very few, but some that said absolutely not. We don't want anyone in our home. And that was okay too. So Like I said, this was not sustainable. It served its purpose for the opening of the school and for the first few months, but then beginning in January, well, actually we began in November to bring back students in a flexible kind of schedule where we began to do some of this work at the school as the government allowed us to do so. And in January, we were able to do a full-on alternative return, and we got really cocky. Because we didn't have to close the school at all until Semana Santa. And then, you know, everything hit right in Colombia. So it was really a real dose of humility for us as a school, thinking that we got this, we have those protocols, look how good we are, we're not infecting anyone, and then all of a sudden, boom, we had to close for 3 weeks. And now with the third wave now here in Colombia, we came back for 1 week, and then we had to close again. We just finished up another week of complete distance learning. We're going to start up again on Monday with back face-to-face, and we just don't know how it's going to go from week to week. So it really, for us, has been humbling, and it's been real and authentic, and our teachers are masters now at like, well, we've planned for this, but if we need to shift, we will. And so like today we have a driver delivering kits to our families. We have 5 families who are too scared to go back to school face-to-face, and so that's all right, that's okay, we're going to deliver your materials home. And we have an alternative virtual schedule for you. So that's our reality, and those are some of the things we've done. We certainly don't have all the answers, but those are some of the things that have worked for us.
Woohoo! And with that, we've come to the end of our session with so many amazing pieces to reflect on. We do want to open up the forum now for questions and just comments, and take advantage of these amazing women that are here with so much to give, and so smart and so experienced, that shed some light into what is possibly coming up for the rest of us. Thank you so much, Jill and Amaris. Okay, open up your microphone, or you can also use the chat bar if you'd like to comment or ask them any questions.
I'd like to say something and then ask something maybe. Knowing both Jill and Amaris, and having worked in different kinds of schools, I know that one of the biggest barriers is really a school that walks its talk. You know, a lot of schools talk about stuff, but then there's a lot of barriers to doing things. And I have found that regardless of our roles in schools as leaders, whether we are heads of section, curriculum coordinators, even the head of school, there are some limitations. But I think it's important for us not to use those as excuses that we really can't do what we'd like to do, because we can still do a lot. And when I was working at CAO, for example, I inherited like an environment, which I think is key, that Amaris and Jennifer had left in middle school, where I wasn't the guy who knew it all. And I would talk to them, and they had this environment where they could contribute, and I could be flexible enough with them. So I think my point in this is that we're not always going to have the owners or the boards or the parents that we want to make things happen, to do things like we'd like. I think Amaris is in a special position. She has a lot of more leeway there. She has a lot more room to do things. We don't all have that. But I think we still have to do the most we can and not use that as an excuse. So kind of my question is, what do you think, what can you do, or what is at least one thing you can do to kind of get, the powers to be to open up a little bit and to trust a little bit more, and maybe some of the school leadership when you want to do some of these things that are crazy for some of these boards or some people, some parents, how do you do that, or what's worked for you guys?
So
go ahead, Jill.
No, go ahead. That's okay.
No, I just want to say, you know, I've worked with a lot of schools around the world, a lot of boards, done a lot of consulting as well. And really, for me, it's knowing what's important to them, right? Like what is their non-negotiable? For some, it's about student achievement. For some, it's about enrollment. For some, it's about parent satisfaction, right? Like, so knowing what it is that is their non-negotiable, and then using that as the vehicle to show them why it is your crazy idea or your crazy, you know, process is going to get them there. I think it's about convincing them and showing them that, but just knowing like what is their what is the most important thing to them, because that's what talks in all honesty, in my experience. Jill?
And just to piggyback on that, my presentation was with one of the director of innovations from a school I'm working with in New York. We have reimagined how the board is involved with student learning. And so when it comes to, first off, working with the board, we have let go of any term or relationship to the words buy-in, because buy-in is an insurance policy practice. We want boards to enroll themselves based on the alignment of the board's vision for the school, the human capacity that we're building at every level, and through that environment. And so we've actually signed up school boards to be part of poster sessions for teachers who are reimagining how to use project-based learning. And then boards are, and not with a lot of easy, you know, why should we do this? This isn't part of what a school board does, but we're starting to reimagine the interactions and the impact a school board can have as we drive change. And so when we're looking at schools like Colegi Montserrat behind me in Barcelona, or we're looking at schools in Kazan, Russia, like the Anglo-American school in Moscow. And so we're changing the way the board is interacting with teachers. And it's giving us the ability to say, let me connect you with the school leader who took that crazy leap 10 years ago and show you the results. So we first build those relationships. We show them those results. Here's, you know, this school that's doing that. Look at the universities and the test results from their students. And they're doing all experiential project-based learning. It's a museum school in Detroit. So we're providing the concrete examples because what we're finding is those schools are out there, they exist. And what is it we're measuring at the variety of schools that we can share with school boards to get them to open up and enroll themselves in the process, because we know that that's how they're going to achieve the vision. And that's been a huge shift. So right now I'm working with YCIS in Silicon Valley, which is a sister school to all the YCIS international private schools in China. And so we're connecting school boards between the different school systems and getting them to work together about the ways in which they produce for their own careers and their own professions, and connect that to the content standards that kids are learning. And when we start to get boards to realize that the data that we're using to make sure visions are aligned, we can do that through project-based learning. And then when they have a deeper understanding, that's when we're getting the buy-in, not before. And that's been a huge shift in, I would say, you know, for all the schools that I'm working with, changing the board is our community engagement process. And over half the schools that we've done that in, they're the ones that have shifted into PBL, because we're saying, hey, you know what, Diego, let me connect you with Fluz Garipov, who runs a PBL international school in Kazan, which is like the economic epicenter of Russia right now. And find, because you have connections, you can talk with him. And I think it's building out the networks for boards to see how that change has taken shape. Sorry, I probably added too many words for that, but I hope that was helpful.
But I think, Jill, you bring up a really important point. It's almost like reimagining the role of the board, right? Reimagining
Yeah.
You talked a lot about shifting the mindset. So, and that's all about, the underpinning of the school culture piece that you and Amaris have discussed throughout. So thank you for pointing that out, how the role of the board also needs to change, and they need to be invited to do that through these relationships
Yeah.
that you're talking about, making these connections. Amazing answers, both of you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Diego, for the question. Anybody else? Leo, you look deep in thought.
No, I was just, I mean, it was just, it was incredible what they've done. And no, and listening to what Jill and Amari said is, yeah, it's true. The boards, well, I work at Colegio Alemán, and we're part of the 140 German schools worldwide. And even though you want to do some things, there's just obligations or standards or demands that are put on by Germany that you're like, you hate them, but you can't do anything about it. Just deal with the best. No, and it was just really interesting, and I took the chance to look up Amaris' school on the web, and wow, it looks incredible. I just want to congratulate you. And
Thank you.
just
Thank
amazing.
you.
All the way you're able to just, I don't know, set up and organize all those projects in such short time. Definitely, I got to go in and steal that part from your brain.
Sure. And yeah, and absolutely, if any of you guys want to actually see the whole thing, I can actually share that with you, so that you can see. It's a lot of work. Not going to lie. And that's the other thing too, that this has been probably one of the hardest years for educators ever. My daughter, I have a daughter who's also a teacher, and she said the same thing, and she's in the US, in a very different setting. And so that's one of the things that I'm really, as a leader, really wanting to make sure that I pay a lot of attention to, is to our educators, and to, this is really, really hard work. They're putting in more and more time than they've ever done before, because they're planning multiple different lessons, different ways of delivering that lesson, not knowing from day to day. Many of them dealing with personal pandemic issues in their own family or themselves. And so that this is like, what you saw there is just this tiny little fraction of, all of the behind the scenes work that goes into that. But all to say that doing this as a community, and leaning on each other and working smarter, not harder. I tell my teachers this all the time: be smart about it. Like, let's do this together. Like, let's really make sure that we are maximizing all of our incredible potentials. So, but I'll be happy to share any of that with you guys that would like.
Thanks.
Well, that just about brings us to the end of the session. Anybody else wants to comment or take the opportunity to?
Me. Well, now I'm your fan. Yeah, I was checking the website and I think it's great. What you have done is fantastic, and I'm going to steal some ideas from you. Definitely, I have to be very honest. I'm from Mexico, and here in Mexico, our leaders are very close-minded. So to innovate, to do what you have done, I think is possible, and we reach, but our mind stops us. In what you have done today, I was thinking like entering, sorry, because I arrived late. I had a class before, that's why I couldn't arrive on time. But I don't regret. I mean, what I learned from you today was awesome. So thank you very much, and just congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jennifer, I think you raised your hand, correct?
Yes, I was just wanted to offer too something I've noticed with school transformation, especially in the upper grades in middle and upper middle school, high school, but also upper primary, is that the more you can hook these bigger transformations you want to do to student voice and what kids are looking for and asking for. I think that's actually a really important strategic element for leaders, meaning that sometimes things that might be controversial if the adults were suggesting it would be viewed really differently by parents, especially if it came from the kids themselves. And so that I think can also be a really interesting way of thinking about the school change process, you know. And I found that kids at Caobos, for example, had really clear ideas about what they wanted to see happen at the school and what could make it a better community in every regard, and really learning, you know, helping the adults learn to listen to them and then really act on the basis of that, as opposed to their participation just being tokenistic, I think was really, really key to some of the bigger accomplishments we were able to create.
Thank you, Jennifer, for adding your comments, and thank you all for participating. It has been a rich session. We thank Amaris and Jill for their time and their expertise. We are blessed to have such talented people be part of our forum. And with that in mind, just to save the date, right, Gabby?
Yes, please. We are going to be coming up, as Andrea said. I checked the calendar, and yes, May 9th is the first session we ever had on a Saturday. It was a meet and greet. So we're definitely going to celebrate that. And on May 29th, we have this amazing session. Andrew Sherman is going to be leading it, and it's, you know, talking about compassion, as creating this culture of compassion for school communities, but as well for this momentous time, I guess, in society where we're facing this big crisis, and it's something that we need to find innovative ways to work towards. You know, as schools, we have this duty to help construct a much better world, a much better society, and we truly think educators, we have this amazing challenge and you know, just I think the honor of leading to that. Sometimes it can be exhausting, as Amaris well said, and we have to take care of ourselves. So we're going to be addressing that, and we hope, you know, you guys can join us. We're going to be sharing the material from today, as we always do, and of course the video, we're going to make it available on our YouTube channel and posting it on our WhatsApp group that all of you are part of. If you're not in the WhatsApp group, just, you know, let us know so that we can invite you and you can have access to the video and the PDF. All right. And I think we're good to go, right, Andrea?
Yes, Gabby, thanks for summing all of that up. And we're wishing you guys an amazing week ahead. And as we wind down the school year, that we've made it this far together, and hooray for all of you. Amazing work. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, everybody.
so
Thank
much.
you. Have a good weekend.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank